Okay. Well, yes, 30 years working in the space industry. You can see the grey hairs, and thanks to lockdown, there's a lot more hair than usual. But yeah, I'm very proud to be the CEO of Lacuna Space. And what Lacuna Space is trying to do is we're trying to extend connectivity so that we can extend the reach of IoT devices to absolutely everywhere in the world. It kind of came about as a bit of a combination of myself with space industry experience and Thomas Telkamp, who, well, everybody in the LoRa world knows that name. So it was the two of us sort of got together and sort of said, there's something to be done here. The big issue is making sure that we can get connectivity to absolutely everywhere, and satellites can play a role in that. A little bit about my background. So yeah, I started out in the space industry, but that's the only industry I've worked in all my life, really. Although I like to think I work in the IoT industry now rather than the space industry. We keep kind of trying to stress to people that, you know, we're an IoT company that does a bit of space, not a space company that does IoT. And yeah, it sort of makes it sound like I was someone that grew up as a great sort of, I don't know, Star Wars enthusiast and space geek from the age of 4 and things like that. But it wasn't really like that. I just sort of stumbled into it by accident. I came out of university and I was doing sort of writing code for computational fluid dynamics for analyzing fluid flows around nuclear reactors when a guy, a very well-known guy in the space industry, came up and sort of said to me, come work for me because I've got these sort of rockets and things like that. And of course that sounded tremendously exciting, and that was 30 and a bit years ago. And yeah, ended up working in the space industry ever since, which has been great fun. It's been really good. And I think the bit that I really enjoy about it is I've been involved in several entrepreneurial sort of outfits within the space industry, and of course everybody immediately thinks of, you know, flying to distant planets or doing, you know, fancy stuff like that with Hubble Space Telescope and what have you. But the part of the industry that really interests me is actually the bit that delivers real benefits to everybody on a day-on-day basis, and of a huge number of satellites up there that are doing things that sort of contribute to our well-being. And most people don't even realize that they're there and what they're doing and how dependent they are on satellites for their everyday existence. So that's the stuff that interests me. It's the commercial and side of the space industry. How's that for an introduction?
That's perfect. It's perfect because it's so true. It's the bit that's hidden. It's totally beneath the surface. Everyone, you know, space is sexy. You got to admit it. Space is sexy with its astronauts and its rockets. But there is so much more, and layers and layers and layers of service. And what would our lives be like without satellites up there and our mobile phones?
Yeah, I sort of get it when I speak to people. They're sort of heavily enthused and got loads of questions, and I kind of take it for granted, really. You know, I've got several astronauts who are friends and things, and I don't really think of it much like that. But it's when you step back and you spend time to look at it, it is really, really interesting. And I think there's loads of statistics been cited about, you know, the influence it has on a life, but the one sort of strikes me is like the average person touches or uses a space asset around 30 times in a day, whether that be from going to a cache point machine where you're using the position timing information from GPS, whether it be the logistics chain supplying your goods in the supermarket that's relying upon satellite navigation or weather forecasts in order to determine what food they're going to have in the supermarket that weekend. You know, it probably is a hidden technology that has a huge influence on our life.
Yeah, and with the growth of IoT, that'll just get more and more and more and more.
Yeah, I think IoT is going to be much the same. I mean, it's probably a bit odd to talk about space industry because, okay, there is an industry, but really the important thing about it is what it does and what it delivers. And in that sense, IoT is very much the same. There is an IoT industry, but to some extent, somewhat irrelevant. The important bit about IoT is actually what you do with it and what the outcomes are and what the outputs are for other different industries and how it helps them be much more productive.
Very well said. Thank you. And then, okay, so if we, one question I'm asking everyone, and it's funny because in your kind of preparation, you said, well, I've been kind of tracking ships from space, but that's not IoT. Like how long have I been in IoT? I don't really know, because what is IoT? So kind of what is IoT to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, because I mean, the problem with IoT as a field is such a broad field. There are so many things that could be included or excluded. And I mean, I quoted that example to you because probably my work on that tracking ships from space was predated really the use of the term IoT, or at least the use of widespread use of the term IoT. And for that reason, I never really thought of it as that. It was just asset tracking. And but in reality, it was. And it's part of the problem we get as an industry as a whole is everybody, you know, when many different users are talking about IoT, there's such a range of things that are included, you know, and ranging completely from things that are virtually, well, that's just a wired connection to a device that I'm controlling with a high flow of data rate, right through to sort of low power wide area networks, which have got huge, you know, huge reach, but then very small data packets. And in between that, there's a whole spread of applications. And yeah, of course, obviously the thing that really interests me and the things that's exciting is right towards that end of the spectrum where you're going for very, you know, very long distance communication. You're doing the things that just cannot be done by wireless, normal sort of wireless connected systems.
Yeah, and we should use this as an opportunity for a plug that Lacuna Space have got the world record for the furthest LoRa communication. Okay.
Yeah, funny. Yeah, funny. It's kind of a hotly debated thing, but once again, that was really an accident. I mean, it's sort of the fact that it kind of even ended up being thought of as world records was not a deliberate thing. We were basically just trying to put some evidence together to help people understand that you can communicate with LoRa over vast distances. Actually, the limitation is the curvature of the earth and everything that else is in the way. So when I turn around and say we communicate to a satellite which is 500 kilometers in the air, most people say, well, that can't be done because I struggle to get 5 kilometers or whatever. So in the initial days, we started doing these sort of low altitude balloon flights just to try and understand the extent of the distance. And also, actually, it gave us a lot of very valuable measurements about what was happening in the use of the spectrum, the ISM spectrum, and what else was happening, so that we could kind of work out, as we got very high up into orbit and we could see lots and lots of devices in our field of view, were we going to be able to discriminate them? So we set about flying these balloons and gathering the data from that. And that was great fun. That really was fun. That kind of excited me because that was a whole new world. And yeah, in the course of it, we ended up sort of, well, we flew one. I think we did some connections that were 600-700 kilometers, and sort of said, hey, well, that's a world record, sort of waiting for somebody else to challenge it. And it didn't. What happened was other people tried to beat it. And then purely by accident at the Things virtual conference this year, we flew a balloon as a bit of a demo, just to kind of once again make it a bit more interesting for this virtual conference, and had no expectation whatsoever of it sort of breaking the record again, and it did. So yeah, all good fun.
You're at the true cutting edge.
A geek's paradise. It's great fun. Yeah.
So if we take a kind of step back and kind of the helicopter view then of the ecosystem, and all of the fact that things are interconnected, just from kind of the perspective that you are, how would you describe the kind of ecosystem or the maturity of the IoT marketplace today?
Yeah, that's. I think that's probably the most important question for the industry as a whole, because without doubt, there are a whole load of us that are immersed in the industry that kind of know it, understand it, can see the art of the possible. But still, very much, it's a very fragmented industry because you've got so many different protocols, competing protocols. You know, law isn't the only thing that's there. You've got so many ways of using it. You've got so many different devices, and very much it's still in the domain of people who are coders, who are people who are hands-on experience of sensors and devices, can get it and use it. But really, to drive it towards mass adoption, that's only ever going to happen when somebody who's completely not in our field, with no understanding whatever, can pick it up out of a box and very simply plug it in, use it reliably. And I know we all claim that that's can be done with our systems, but the truth of the matter is, if you really hand most of the products that are out there today to somebody who's completely outside our field, it's a challenge to get stuff connected. And we will only get the mass adoption of IoT when we actually finally take that step. And that's not a criticism, it's just a journey that we're on. We're at the start of the journey, and that's what's making it really very interesting. And for sure, the winners in this world are going to be the people that get to that point where they kind of make it completely accessible.
Yeah, and I think that is a journey, and it's about trying to de-skill it to make it more and more accessible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if we talk then about the skills, are you okay?
Sorry, I've got you might hear a little bit of background noise here. The lockdown, we might be joined by my dog as well.
Dogs and children, welcome. So if we then talk then about the skills that are needed for success, like in the marketplace right now. So you're talking about, you know, the fact that the ecosystem is on a journey, that you still need to understand it to a certain level to apply it. Yeah. And if we then talk about someone then coming in or thinking, okay, I need to start my digital transformation. I want to have more data to drive my business decisions. I want to get started with IoT. What kind of advice do you have for someone who's starting a project? And it can be a really talented software engineer in a company, or it could be a CEO wanting to put a budget against starting a project. What advice would you have for them getting started?
Yeah, okay. Once again, yeah, good question. And I think probably an important thing here is probably for that person who's getting started to learn a bit, but not learn too much, because I think that the real challenge is there's so much information and so many permutations and so many possibilities. It's easy for somebody outside of the industry to be completely overwhelmed and suddenly think, this is massively complicated, I can't do it. And I think that if that person then were to conclude, I need to go to some outside agency to help them, some sort of systems integrator to help me find the solution, that's great. But I think they do need to learn a little bit at first, so that they're an informed buyer, so that they can make sure that they're going to the right person to get that help to do that transformation. I would say if you're starting from scratch, trying to reinvent it yourself is crazy. There are lots of very, very capable companies that can help you make that transformation. But like I say, I think the trick is learn a bit, and probably, unlike most other fields, there is such a massive material online that can help you understand, so you can make a few informed decisions about, this is the type of system, this is the protocol I want to work with, this is the sort of architecture, these are the scale of challenges that I have, so that then you can make an informed decision about, this is the personal outfit that I'm going to go to help me make that transformation.
Nice. And then in preparation for this, one of the hardest questions you had answering was about your leadership style. So if we talk then about less about the technology and more about the people. So there's a lot out there about the technology and the platform and the architecture. But what about the skills or the approach, the type of culture or style that you need when working with IoT?
Yeah. Well, the challenge and the real difference with IoT is, of course, at the moment is a very nascent industry, and it's full of lots and lots of startup companies. Okay, there are a few big companies around that are kind of, you know, the sort of setting up the basic protocols and things like that. But really and truly, the hub of the industry is those small startups that are the interface between those technologies like LoRa and the marketplace of huge companies. And there are all these tiny companies in the middle sort of thing. So, I mean, firstly, that's brilliant when you're at this early stage of the industry, because those small companies can move really quickly. They can adopt the newest technologies. They can get there. But as is the problem when anything that moves quickly and is very responsive, you've got a danger that it heads off in a random direction and does crazy stuff. I mean, for me, that's the interesting bit about working in this industry, is getting back to working with smaller companies. I originally worked with smaller companies, went to running some very big companies, but getting back to working with small companies is what's great fun. It's great fun because you can move, you can have an idea in the morning, by the afternoon you can have assembled a group of people who think it's a great idea and you're kind of moving on it. That's brilliant, that's great. But in terms of, you know, teams of people that work in, you know, it's highly tech, it's high tech, and it's highly specialized. So you tend to be dealing with less generalists than in other fields. You've got somebody who's very, very particular, is, I don't know, one particular embedded engineer, some particular language. There's very, very sort of particular partitions. And I think as a leader of those organizations, that's somewhat difficult to manage, because those people are so specialist in those fields. It's sometimes difficult to judge whether they're doing the right thing and heading in the right direction. So you simply got to trust, you've got to place a lot of trust in those people, select the best people around. And of course, we all know that's a huge challenge for the industry, because there's such a shortage of, really, really good people. But that's the, I'm not quite sure how I've gotten to that and whether it answered the question, but that's the challenge that faces all leaders.
And it's also the diversity. You need people who are really good at physical product. You need people who are really good at product. You need people who are really good with data, the visualization, and then the infrastructure, the electronics. And none of that's business or sales.
Exactly. Exactly. And I mean, even the furthest we kind of go in most companies at the moment is thinking a little bit about a user interface, let alone the thought of how do we package it in the box and what does it look like and feel like when the consumer opens it at the other end. Yeah.
Okay. And then I kind of want to just kind of begin wrapping up by talking about then, what does success look like for you? And I'm asking you this as you, the person. So it's what does success really mean for you?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of really blessed, because I'm at the sort of later stages of my career. So I've kind of done a few things and got a few things out in the system that I needed to do. And so I can actually spend my time thinking, as I did do a few years back, about what do I really want to do next, just for me? What is it that excites me? I haven't got the stress of a huge mortgage and children and things like that to worry about and think about. I can actually think for the first time in my life, what is it that really excites me and sort of will be regarded as success? And I think the answer to me, it's sort of like, I think there are two parts to it. Firstly, it's like, keep learning every day and new stuff every day. If I find myself going over the old stuff and just churning something out for the sake of it, that's like, well, what's the point of living? It's sort of like, come on, new stuff to get into. And in this IoT field, there's just so much new to get into. That's been really, really exciting and great. I've loved it. And I think the other bit for me is that I know this probably sounds a bit crass and probably everybody says it, but I do get a great kick at helping other people get going. So if you've got other people in the company, and especially younger people, and it's their first jobs and things like that, supporting them to get going on a career path is something that I find really rewarding. So I think if I come out at the end of every day and I sort of think, I've helped somebody else and I've learned something myself, that's a successful day, ticking the box.
Perfect. Thank you so much.